Kirsten's Surprise, A Christmas Story, Book 3. Kirsten's family. Kirsten, a 9-year-old who moves with her family to a new home on American frontier in 1854. Papa, Lars, Mama, and Peter. The Larsens sometimes long for Sweden, but they never lose heart for the challenges of pioneer life. And friends. Singing Bird, Kirsten's secret friend and Indian girl. Miss Winston, Kirsten's teacher who lives with Uncle Olaf's family for the winter. Anna and Inger, Lisbeth and Uncle Olaf. Kirsten's American relatives live on a new farm in Minnesota, where they make the Larson families feel at home. Chapter 1. Pestering. The first year that Kirsten and her family lived in the little log cabin in Uncle Olaf's family in Minnesota, the autumn weather lasted into December. Although the stream froze and they had to melt ice for water, there was only a little snow. Papa often stroked his beard and pointed to the geese flying south. A very hard winter is on the way, he said. It'll be much colder than here in Sweden. We have to get ready for the deep snows. But Kirsten thought the traces of snow on the pines looked like the sugar Mama sprinkled on Ginger's snaps, light and sweet. It was hard to believe winter was coming. One day, when Kirsten came out into the cabin after school, she smelled cinnamon. Something smells delicious, she said. What are you making, Mama? Mama had her sleeves rolled up and her apron on. It's time to bake Christmas bread, she answered. Come help me. Kirsten washed her hands and tied one of Mama's long aprons over her school dress. Don't forget to cover your hand with flour so the dough won't stick, Mama said. She took several loaves to risen bread dough from the cupboard and set them on the pine table in front of Kirsten. Kirsten pushed her fingers into the dough and punched it down. When the air was out of the dough, she shaped it into round loaves to rise a second time. The smells of yeast and spices made her mouth water. Mama wiped her hands on her apron. I don't know, Kirsten. Some things here are different. And you know we don't have money for extra treats, but we'll do the best we can. Mama must have seen that Kirsten was disappointed, for she added, Here, take a piece of dough and make a loaf of bread for your dar. As Kirsten rolled a piece of dough between her palms, she glanced at little Sari. Little Sari sat on Kirsten's front door bed. She was a real dar at all. She wasn't a real doll at all. She was only a worn stocking stuffed with milkweed floss. Kirsten had made her because she missed her real Sari so much. Real Sari, with her pretty face and her blue dress, was so far away in Riverton. Kirsten had to leave her there last summer, when all the money Papa had saved for their trip to America was gone. He couldn't hire a wagon to carry their trunks, so they left most of their things in the warehouse and walked at least 20 miles to Uncle Olaf's farm. I wish I had my real Sari, Kirsten said. She set the little loaf of bread on the wooden tray with the big loaves Mama had shaped. I know you miss your doll, Mama said, but work comes before play. We needed both your hand to carry toys and blankets that day. Mama's voice softened. And you'll see Sari again soon. Mr. Burkhoff sent word that the trunks have been shipped as far as his store in Maryville. When Papa has time, he can take the wagon and get them. Oh, could he go today? Kirsten asked happily. Maryville is 10 miles away, Kirsten. Mama said, it'll take Papa half the day to get there and back with the wagon. It's too late to go today. Will he go tomorrow? No, Kirsten, Mama said. He won't have time tomorrow. Can we just ask him? Kirsten said. It will only make him cross to ask. Mama said. Papa is too busy now. When will Papa have time? Kirsten knew she was pestering Mama, but she wanted the trunks and Sari so badly that she couldn't help herself. Mama leaned across the table and brushed flour off Kirsten's nose. You know, Papa and Uncle Olaf have to get the farm ready for winter. That comes first. Be patient a little while longer, Kirsten. Or why don't you and I take the wagon and get the trunks? You know how to drive the horse and wagon, Mama. No, Mama smiled. You're full of ideas today. But there's school for you tomorrow, and we aren't strong enough to lift those big trunks. We can get along with what we have until Papa has his work done. But don't you want the straw more made for you and your candlesticks? Kirsten asked. She looked around the bare little cabin. We all need the heavy quilts and our warm clothes for winter, and Papa needs his hand tools. And I need Sari. Or at least miss her. Miss her? Don't you miss your things too? Mama patted the last loaf of bread and set it down on the tray. People are more important than things, Kirsten. Kirsten traced a heart shaped in the flour on the table. You always say that, Mama. But things help me remember people too. When I wear my sweater from Momo, I can picture her knitting it for me. If I could see the Christmas clothes you both wove the rafters, I'd feel like she was here with us. Mama had the dough tray halfway into the cupboard, but now she stopped and looked closely at Kirsten. Even in the dim cabin, Mama's eyes were as blue as the cloudless sky. You're a wise girl, Kirsten. Our things can have special meanings for us. They help us remember. I feel just as you do. You do? Kirsten asked. Mama nodded. I often think of the day we finished packing the painted trunk to bring to America. Do you remember that day? I remember it was spring and there were buds on the maple tree. Momo and your friend, Mrs. Hanson, came early in the morning and stayed all day to help us, Kirsten said. We're used to working together, Mama said softly. How carefully Momo folded our sweaters, and Mrs. Hanson bought dried lavender to put in our lines so that they would smell sweet when we unpacked them here. Mama gazed at the window as though she could see Kirsten's grandmother and Mrs. Hanson right now. I remember how you all laughed when Peter begged to put his sled into the trunk, Kirsten said, and how we all cried when we said goodbye, Mama whispered. We knew we would never see each other again. Kirsten was surprised to see tears in Mama's blue eyes. She didn't know that Mama could get homesick too. Mama, are you all right? Kirsten said. Abruptly, Mama turned and shifted the bread tray into the cupboard. Of course I am all right. She poured coffee into the coffee pail and held it out to Kirsten. Now take this hot coffee out to the barn for Papa. He forgets to rest warm himself unless we remind him. Let's get on with our works, Kirsten. Papa stood in the back of the wagon to fork hay into the barn. His cheeks was red from work and from cord. He climbed down and took the coffee pail from Kirsten. Just what I need, he said as he sipped the steaming coffee. Bits of hay stuck to his work jacket and his beard. Kirsten leaned against the wagon wheel. Papa, could you go to town tomorrow and get the trunks? Mama and I need some things for the painted trunk especially. Papa glanced at Kirsten over the rim of the pier as he said, when our work is done here, I'll go for the trunks. He said, first things first. Kirsten looked around at the wide fields. The farm was large, and she could see that there was still much to be done. When will our works be finished? She said. It must be done before the heavy snows come, or we won't get through the winter. Now, don't pester me, Kirsten, he said gruffly. But when he handed her back the empty coffee pail, he patted her shoulder. I'll get the trunks as soon as I can. I have time. But Papa didn't have time. The hogs had to be butchered and the meat smoked. Papa and Uncle Olaf spent a whole week repairing fences. They put the new runners on the sleigh and new shoes on the horse. In the evenings, they mended harness leather and stuffed extra clay between the logs and the cabin walls to make the cabin warmer. They put up a fence to keep snowdrifts off the path to the barn. When the heavy snow came, it would be too late to do these important things. Kirsten knew that when the heavy snows came, it would be too late to get the trunks too. The drifts would block the road into Maryville, and the snow wouldn't melt until spring. She couldn't wait until spring to have Sari back. The more Kirsten thought about the trunks, the more reasons she found for wanting them. Surely Lars wanted his skates and Peter wanted his clay whistle. And she thought that unpacking the painted trunks would be like a visit home to Sweden for Mama. Every night when she said her prayers, she prayed that Papa would get the trunks soon. Chapter 2. A Crown for a Queen. Kirsten sat with Lisbeth and Anna in the cozy corner of the barn. These days, it was much too cold to play in their front fort under the cherry tree, so they brought their dolls inside and scooped out room for them in the sweet-smelling hay, and barn cats prowling around, switching their tails. But they were too wild to be petted or put into doll dresses. Kirsten was trying to make a dress for little Sari. She wrapped little Sari in one of Papa's white handkerchiefs and tied a piece of red yarn around it for a sash. Then she pretended to walk little Sari across the hay to Anna. Do you think little Sari looks like St. Lucia? She asked Anna. Anna looked up in surprise. Who? St. Lucia. Don't you know St. Lucia? Kirsten asked, puzzled. Anna shook her head. Is she someone you knew in Sweden? Now Kirsten was really startled. No, Anna. We celebrated St. Lucia days in Sweden. It was the very best part of Christmas. I don't remember Sweden, Lisbeth said. I was just a baby when Mama left. We just celebrate Christmas Day. Kirsten's spirit fell. She hoped this first Christmas in America would be just like Christmas in Sweden. How could it if they didn't have St. Lucia's Day? She thought Mama would be disappointed too. It was her favorite celebration. Tell us about St. Lucia's Day, Anna said. Tell us about St. Lucia's Day, Anna said. She sat her doll on her lap as though the doll listened to. In Sweden, St. Lucia's Day begins the Christmas season. Kirsten explained. It's the darkest day of the whole year. It's so dark that there is only daylight for a few hours. But no one minds the dark because St. Lucia's Day is such fun. Elizabeth was braiding a new part for her doll. What do you do? In each family, one girl gets to be the Lucia Queen. She dresses up in a long white dress and a red sash, and she wears a crown of green leaves and lighted candles. She gets up very, very early in the morning while it's pitch black and everyone is asleep. She lights the candles in her crown, and she goes from room to room in the dark house carrying a tray. First she goes to her parents' room. Even though they've helped her get ready, they can hardly believe their eyes when they see her. She looks so beautiful in her costume. When she walks all the rest of the family and invites them to share Lucia buns and coffees. That breakfast is the first party of the holiday season, Kirsten explains. Anna Gray's eyes grew wider, and she hugged herself. Oh, a white dress and a crown. It sounds beautiful. I wish we had St. Lucia's Day. That gave Kirsten an idea. She motioned for her cousins to draw closer together. Why don't we make a St. Lucia celebration? Just the three of us. We won't tell our parents or the boys. We'll get everything ready and surprise them. Wouldn't that be fun? Anna's round face glowed with excitement. We'll keep it a secret. Oh, I love secrets. But Elizabeth cocked her head and frowned. It would be exciting, all right, but how could we get all the special things we'd need? That won't be hard, Kirsten insisted. Mama always has coffee, and we can slice a loaf of our Christmas bread and pretend it's Lucia buns. That takes care of the tray. How about the crown? Elizabeth asked. I think we could make one from a wild grapevine and winter green leaves. It shouldn't be too hard to. As Kirsten planned, she grew more and more excited. Now Anna was too eager to sit still. She hopped to her feet and waved her arms, and the cats scattered and hissed. You can't be St. Lucia, Kirsten, because you know how, Anna cried. But where will we get a white dress and a red sash? Said Elizabeth. I have a white dress, Kirsten answered. Well, it's really a white nightdress, but it's just what we need. I wore it last year for St. Lucia's Day. It's in our trunk. Now the three girls looked at each other in silence. Then they each let out a sigh. But your trunks aren't here, Elizabeth said. When is St. Lucia's Day? Anna said. It's December 13th, Kirsten said. Quickly she counted on her fingers. That's 5 whole days from now, Elizabeth shrugged sadly. Then it's no use planning. If your father doesn't get that trunk, there's no white dress and sash. Anna let herself tumble backwards into the hay. When she got up, hay was stuck in her braids. It was a grand idea, but we don't have candles for the crown either. Mama would surely miss them if we took them without asking her. But now Kirsten was determined to make a St. Lucia celebration. She had to think of something. Of course, they could ask Miss Winston. Kirsten got to her knees and grabbed Anna's ankle to get her attention. We could ask Miss Winston to get us some candles and to help us. Miss Winston was the teacher at Powder Keg School. She'd been living at Uncle Olaf's house for several weeks and would stay there all winter until she moved in with another family. Anna grinned. Oh, I know Miss Winston would like a party. She'd be telling us about the sad to think she'll miss them. And she has extra candles in her trunk. That still leaves the dress, Lisbeth said slowly. I don't know. Lisbeth, Papa practically promised me that he'd get the trunk soon, Kirsten said. We'll make all the things we need and we'll practice. When he gets to trunk, we'll be ready." Lisbeth looked relieved. "We should start getting everything ready now. We'll have a practice up in our room, and so the boys won't know what we're doing. And we'll have to hide the crown under the bed, won't we?" Anna cried. "Or under Miss Winston's bed. They'd never look there." Suddenly Lisbeth held her finger to her lips. "Shh!" Christine listened. She heard the cows mooing, then Papa's deep voice as he brought them into the baby market. "It's Papa," she whispered. "Go right now and ask him to get the trunks," Lisbeth said. "Tell him it's important." Christine took a deep breath. She knew how Papa hated to be pestered, but she had to ask him about the trunks one more time. She climbed out of the hay and went over to Papa, who sat on a small stool milking a brown cow. He leaned his forehead against the cow's side. Steam rose from the pail of warm milk. "Papa, I've been thinking about our trunks again. Can you please get them soon?" Christine said. Papa's breath was a white cloud at his lips. He raised his eyebrows. "Just why are the trunks so important, Christine?" Christine stubbed her boot against the empty bucket. "I remember our candlesticks are in the painted trunks. Mama will want the candlesticks for Christmas. We all want things we can't have. I've heard enough about that trunk," Papa said. He squirted a stream of milk into the mouth of the gray cat by Christine's feet. "Please, Papa," said Papa. Now Papa scowled. "Don't ask me again or I'll be angry." Christine walked slowly to the star where Blackie, Uncle Olive's horse, munched hay. She patted his coat, which was thickened against the cord. "What can I do now?" she murmured to Blackie. "Everything depends on that trunk." Blackie snuffled and pushed his soft nose against her hand as though he sensed she needed comfort. On the way home from school the next day, Christine cut a length of grapevine, and Lisbeth picked wintergreen. They took them to Anna and Lisbeth's sleeping loft to work on the St. Lucia crown. Miss Winston was there. She sat on her bed to grade arithmetic tests. "Of course you may use some of my candles," she said when they asked her for them. She took 3 new candles from the trunk at the foot of her bed and cut them in 2 to make the right length. "I'll hide the crown in my trunk if you like," Miss Winston added. "I like surprises too." So that part was easy, but making the crown was harder. The first crown Elizabeth braided was too small. It looked like a bird's nest," Anna said when she saw it perched on top of Kirsten's head. The second crown Elizabeth made was too large. It slipped right down over Kirsten's head and laid on around her neck. "And that one looks like Blackie's harness," Anna told her. "Measure Kirsten's head first," Miss Winston suggested. She gave Lisbeth a piece of string. Lisbeth tied it around Kirsten's head. Then she braided the grapevine exactly the size of the circle of strings. This time the crown fit perfectly. Lisbeth stuck sprigs of wintergreen into the braided vine, and Miss Winston set the candles in securely. Then they decided how the tray would be laid out. "We'll have coffee and Christmas spread, and a candle in the center, and the lights will be out except for the candles," Kirstine said. "St. Lucia comes into a dark room with her crown glowing." Anna put the crown on her head and pretended to carry a tray. She walked slowly around the room. "What does St. Lucia see now?" she said. "Say, St. Lucia invites you to breakfast," Kirstine told her. Anna cried, "Oh, this is fun." Lisbeth came to sit on the bed beside Kirstine. She took Kirstine's hand. This is a good plan. Really, it is. If your trunk doesn't come in time for St. Lucia Day, we can have the celebration next year. Don't worry, Kirstine, Elizabeth said. But Kirstine couldn't help but worry. She had butterflies in her stomach. She'd gotten everyone's hopes up, especially her own. And she was afraid to ask Papa about the trunk again. She would just have to wait and see what happened. There was nothing else she could do now. Chapter 3. To Town at Last. On Tuesday, Kirstine woke to the sound of voices. Except for the fire in the stove, the cabin was so dark and cold that she could see her breath. From her bed, she saw the thick ice covered the little window. Peter and Lars slept, their heads almost hidden under their covers. When Mama and Papa were up, they sat at the pine table, talking softly. Kirstine stayed under the court and listened. We finished putting up the snow fences yesterday, Papa said. I think we were just in time. It looks like we'll have another heavy snow soon. But I could drive into town today. Olaf wouldn't need the horse. What do you think? If it's safe to go, you should try. One more hard snow and the roads will be blocked until spring, Mama said. Will you pack me a lunch then? I'll leave as soon as the milking is done and be back with the trunks before supper time, Papa said. The trunks. Now Kirstine was wide awake, her pondering. Tomorrow was St. Lucia's Day. They would get the trunks just in time. She was out of her bed with a leap. She ran across the rough boards of the cabin floor and threw her arms around Mama's neck. Oh, Mama, please may I go along with the wagon to get our trunks? It doesn't matter if I miss one day of school. Papa was already pulling on his heavy boots. There's too much snow for the wagon. I'm going to hitch Blackie to the sleigh. And there's not much room in that smart sleigh, Kirstine. But I don't take up much room, Kirstine cried. It's a long drive. You'll get cold. Go to school with your brothers, Papa said. But I want to go with you more than anything in the world, Papa. Do you want to come with me that much? Papa asked. What will you do? I can help you. I'm sure of it. I can keep you company so you won't get lonely, Kirstine said. Please say yes. She thought Papa might scowl because he didn't like to be urged to change his mind, but instead he laughed. You have a strong word, Kirstine, just like your mama. You may come with me, eat your breakfast, and dress in your warmest clothes. Then bring me in a bucket of snow so Mama will have water today. I'll hitch up the sleigh and we'll be on our way. Hurry now. Kirstine hurried. She put on 2 pairs of wool stockings, all of her quilted petticoats, her heaviest sweater, and a shawl. As she ate her pancakes, she watched Mama pack her lunch in the hamper and heat stones in the oven. The warm stones would keep Kirstine and Papa's feet cozy in the sleigh. The first rays of light came through the clouds as Papa brought the sleigh from the barn. Kirstine climbed into the sleigh beside Papa, and Mama handed her the food hamper. Here's your lunch, and I put in a loaf of Christmas bread for you to give Mr. Burkhoff at the store. We might not see him again until spring. Tell him we wish him a happy Christmas. Mama stood by the gate and waved as the sleigh pulled away down the road. Take care, she called after them. Blackie whinnied and stamped. The harnessed bells round his neck jingled merrily. Kirstine laughed with pleasure when she heard the bells. She remembered the wonderful holidays in Sweden, the sleigh rides they'd taken to church, to the homes of their friends. Snow was falling as Kirstine and Papa left the farm. The snowflakes settled on Blackie's back like moths and moths and caught in Christine's eyelashes. Papa turned the horse east towards the small town of Maryville. Now the wind was at their backs. Under a fur blanket, Christine was snug by Papa's side. Papa's wide-brimmed hat was pulled low. He wore his sheepskin mittens with high tops that came up over his jacket cuffs, and the red scarf Mama had knitted for him. As they slid along, he began to sing a Christmas carol. His deep voice seemed to fill up his whole chest and push ahead of him through the softly falling snow. Christine sang too. She was happy. In no time, they'd pick up their trunks and be back at the farm. Then, tomorrow morning before dawn, she and Elizabeth and Anna would surprise everyone, and with the St. Lucia celebration, their plans were turning out perfectly after all. Maryville. By the time they reached Maryville, it was snowing harder. The soft snow made caps on the tops of the fence posts and piled up on the shingled rooftops. Kirsten and Papa drove past ours. The church and the sawmill then stopped in front of the church. The sawmill then stopped in front of Burkhoff's general store, where Papa unhitched Blackie from the sleigh. Kirsten watched the men and women in the street. She was glad to smell wood smoke in the air and to hear people greeting one another. Maryville was only a little town, but it had a happy bustle. Inside the store, the delicious scent of spices, new clothes, oiled leather, and sausages reached Kirsten's nose all at once. Mr. Burkhoff stood behind the scales weighing sugar. Then he saw Kirsten and Papa. He wiped his hands on his white apron and came around the counter to shake Papa's hand. He gave Kirsten a hard piece of sugar candy from one of the glass jars. "It's not Christmas yet, but have a little treat," he said. Kirsten handed him the loaf of Christmas bread Mama had sent. "Mama sent you a Merry Christmas greeting," she said, "and thank you for the candy." Mr. Burkhoff raised his white eyebrows. "Christine Larson, the last time you were in my store, you spoke to me in Swedish." Kirsten felt herself blush. "I'm learning English." "So you are, and you speak it very well, too," Mr. Burkhoff said. Thank you. Thank your mother for the bread." "We are here to pick up our trunks," Papa said. "Come with me," Mr. Burkhoff said. He took them to a big storage room at the back of the store. Wooden boxes and barrels were piled clear up the ceiling. Mr. Burkhoff pushed aside some crates to let Kirsten and Papa through. There, by the back door, they saw two big trunks with Anders Larsen painted on the side. Papa slapped the trunk with his open hand, the way he slapped the cows. "Well, Kirsten, here are our things at last." Kirsten leaned against the painted trunk. She traced the flower paintings with her fingertip. Sari was in the trunk, right there under the lid. The white nightdress and red sash she needed for St. Lucia's Day would be near all of Mother's lovely weavings. And at the bottom of the trunk there were heavy wooden sweaters, caps, mittens, the shiny brass candlestick. Oh, everything was in this trunk. It seemed like an old dear friend Kirsten had met again after a long time. She pressed her cheek against the rounded top. "Papa, let's open the trunk now," she said. "I want to watch Syria on the sleigh ride home." Papa and Mr. Burkhoff pushed the trunks at the back door on to the loading platform. "We'll open the trunks when we get home." "We get them home," Papa said. "We've got to go right now. It's snowing harder, and we have a long drive back home." Mr. Burkoff squinted up into the snow. Maybe you folks should stay here until the snow stops, Mr. Larson. Thank you, Papa said, but I think we'll leave now before the snow gets heavier. Don't get lost, Mr. Burkoff warned. This looks like it will be a storm. He lifted Kirstine into a sleigh beside Papa. Merry Christmas! Kirstine called back to Mr. Burkoff as Papa drove the sleigh away from the storm. Mr. Burkoff answered. The car was muffled by the thud of Blackie's step in the snow. Merry Christmas to you, too, braving the blizzard. As they left Maryville in the loaded sleigh, the snow seemed to fall harder every minute. It stung Kirstine's cheek until she pulled her shawl up over her nose. Papa urged Blackie faster, but now the horse had the extra weight of the trunks to pull, and the sleigh didn't skim along as it had done before. Look at the sky, Papa said. The weather changed while we waited in the store. When the road turned west towards the farm, Kirstine saw the sleigh tracks they made earlier were filling with snow. The strong wind drove the snow directly into their faces. There was no way to hide from it. Put the blankets over your head, Papa told Kirstine. She curled up next to Papa's side and buried her face under his arm. She could hear the thump of Papa's heart and muffled jingle of the sleigh bells as Blackie trotted along. Next time Kirstine peeked over the edge of the blanket, all she could see was white. Snow whirled up from the fields like spray blown from the tops of waves. Drifts shifted and moved as Blackie stepped along. Papa's beard was filled with snow. His mustache was white with it. His eyes were blue slits under the snow-caked eyebrows. Where's the road, Papa? Kirstine asked. I can't see it. We're following the fence posts. Blackie can find his way. So he's a smart horse, Papa said. Do you think we should go back to Maryville? We've already come a long way. I think there's a better chance the horse knows his way to the farm. If we just keep heading west, we'll be all right. But Papa frowned into the fiercely blowing snow. Kirstine was worried too. She'd heard stories about settlers who lost their ways in blizzards and walked in circles until they fell down. She'd heard about a boy who froze to death when he got lost between his barn and his house. A snowstorm on the plains was dangerous as a storm on the ocean. Blackie's harness bells sounded faint and lost. His ears were down, his head low. Papa urged him to keep going, but the horse often stumbled in the moving drifts. Kirstine's foot was so cold she could barely move her toes. Under her feet, she felt the stones Mom had heated that morning, the warmth had long since gone out of them. Toss the stones out of the sleigh, Papa told her. We shouldn't make the load lighter. The trunks are heavier than I remembered. But we won't leave our trunks in the snow, will we? Kirstine asked. Papa patted her knee. No, we won't leave our trunks. The snow will let up soon. You'll see. He slapped the reins against Blackie's back, which was thickly covered with snow. Then there were no more fence posts to follow. They drove along beside a dim shadow that Kirstine knew was the edge of the forest, but Blackie walked more and more slowly. Often Papa had to flick the whip across his back to keep him moving. He wants to turn his back to the wind, Papa said, but we have to go straight into the wind if you're going back to the farm. Keep going, Blackie, Kirstine shouted. Her words seemed to disappear into the snow and wind. All at once, Blackie stopped. He wouldn't move. Yo, Papa yelled. Get up there. It was no use. The horse wouldn't take a single step. "What's wrong with him?" Kirsten asked. "He loses his footing in the snow, and that frightens him," Papa said. "I'll have to lead him to stop him moving. Keep him moving." Papa handed Kirsten the reins, wrapped the blanket tightly around her waist, and climbed down from the sleigh. He stepped through the snowdrifts to Blackie's head and took hold of the bridle. "Come on, Blackie, come along now," Papa made, his voice both gruff and soothing. The horse took one step, stopped, then took another step. The bells jingled again. Kirsten realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out with a sigh. Blackie trusted Papa. Now they'd keep going towards home. They went slowly, step by difficult step. Papa climbed through knee-high drifts, even though he was only a few feet in front of hers. Kirsten could hardly see him. He was completely covered with snow. Papa pulled Blackie's bridle, and Kirsten slapped Blackie's flanks with the reins. The snow and cord made Kirsten lightheaded. Sometimes it seemed the sleigh wasn't moving at all. Only the snow seemed to move, like water running in a stream. Then Papa stumbled. He went down on his knees and cried out. Kirsten had never heard Papa cry out in pain before, and the sound was colder than the wind. "Papa," she shouted. "Papa, are you all right?" She jumped out of the sleigh. The snow came up to her hips, but Kirsten pushed through it to Papa's side. Papa tried to stand, but again he went down in the snow. "What's the matter, Papa?" "My knee. I twisted my knee. I can't put my weight on it," he said. His face was very pale, his lips white. There were ice in his mustache. "What can I do?" Kirsten begged him. "Nothing, Kirsten. It's up to Blackie now," Papa answered. "We can't stop here. We have to reach shelter." He dragged himself back to the sleigh, breathing hard. Kirsten wondered how he could ever get back to the high front seat. At last, Papa managed to crawl up. Then he reached down to help Kirsten up beside him. But when he snapped the whip over Blackie's back, the horse wouldn't budge. "It's no good," Papa said. "With no one to lead him, he'll stay right here." Kirsten grabbed Papa's head. "But I can lead Blackie," she said. "You sit in the sleigh, and I'll walk beside him." "Do you think you can walk through the steep snow?" "I'll try, Papa." Papa brushed the snow off Kirsten's shoulders and tied her shawl more tightly over the nose and mouth, and he pulled off his sheepskin mittens and put them on her hands. Inside Papa's mittens, the fleece was warm and dry. Kirsten's cold hands felt like rabbits creeping into a snug home. "You're a good girl, Kirsten," Papa said. "You have a heart." Papa had told Mama she had a heart when she agreed to come here to America. He told Mama she had a heart when she was sick on the ship but didn't lose hope. Kirsten wanted to be as brave as Mama. She pulled herself along Blackie's side. She shook the harness and made the bird sound, "Yo!" and cried in the biggest voice she could manage, "Yo, Blackie, come along." To her surprise, the horse head came up and he followed her. But the going was hard. Kirsten's feet slipped. The drifts were up to her knees, and now her feet were so numb she couldn't even wiggle her toes. Like the horse, she bent her head into the wind and concentrated on just one step, then the next. Snow caked on her lips. "Keep going," she told herself, half-heart Kirsten, but she didn't know where she was going. The whole world was a white blowing snowdrift, and it would soon be dark. Then how would they ever find a way home? Kirsten tried to imagine their home, a little snug cabin somewhere in this storm. It would be warm there. She imagined Mama taking soup for supper. She imagined Elizabeth and Anna waiting to make the St. Lucia's Day surprise. Keep going, Kirstine told herself. She tried to sing the Christmas carol to keep her spirits up, but her lips were so cold she could barely move them. Instead, she began to count the way Miss Winston drew numbers in score. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 4 steps closer to home. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 steps closer to home. Kirstine was glad she'd learned her numbers. Maybe the numbers would keep her moving. 9, 10, 11. She bumped into something. She fell against Blackie's side and looked around. They weren't in the fields near the forest anymore. They were near some rocks. We've come the wrong way, Papa called. The horse has taken us to the valley by the stream. He's lost. Kirstine shielded her eyes from the snow to look. She knew where they were. Blackie hadn't come the wrong way at all. These were the cliffs she'd gone to with Singing Bird, her Indian friend. There was the forked birch tree, bent over by the wind. She knew that tree. She passed it on her way to the cave where she and Singing Bird had sometimes played. Kirstine staggered back to Papa. She reached up and grabbed his hand. I know where we are, Papa. How can you know where we are, Kirstine? The horse has lost his way. I've been here, Kirstine cried. You've been here? Where are we? Papa asked. We're beside a cliff. There's a tiny cave nearby. Kirstine pointed. Papa looked up at the cliff. How far to the cave? It's only a little way, and there's dry wood inside. You can stay there until the storm is over, Kirstine said. Papa tried to stand, but his leg gave out, and he sat again. Can you take care of Blackie? He asked. Yes, I'm sure I can. Then unharness him from the sleigh and lead him to the clump of birch trees. He'll rest there and be glad of it. Groaning, Papa crawled down from the sleigh. He sat on the snow and pushed himself backwards, inching up the slope towards the opening of the cave. As Papa climbed, Kirstine took Blackie's harness off. It was hard to do in Papa's big mittens, so she pulled one off and held it on her teeth while she worked at the buckles. Blackie followed her a few yards to the shelter to the clump of trees. As she tried to rein the birch tree, he whined. Kirstine brushed the snow from his forelock and his face. Good Lord, Blackie, you have heart. Do you know that? You're a very brave horse. Then she followed Papa up the path to the cave. Inside, the cave was dry and not very deep. Near the back was a pile of dry sticks and grass, and the black traces of campfires, and Indians have stayed here where they was hunting. Papa twisted a handful of dry grass. They laid dried sticks overhead. He chipped at a piece of stone with his flint until he got sparks. A tiny flame began in the dry grass. Papa blew gently and the sticks caught fire. Kirstine brought a large branch and laid it by the little fire. First, we must warm up your feet, Kirstine. Take off your boots, Papa said. He leaned against the dry wall of the cave. Kirstine spread the blankets next to Papa, sat down and loosened her boot laces. When she got her boots off, Papa began to rub her feet gently with his warm hands. Soon her toes started to tingle. She knew it was good sign that they hurt when they are frozen. Papa took off his own boots now and put a thick log on the fire. When did you come to this cave? He asked her because Kirstine didn't want to tell him about Singing Bird and the Indian. She said, I was exploring along the streams and I found it. Did you have permission to be so far from the farm? Papa asked sternly. Kirsten shook her head. No, Papa. I wandered farther than I thought. The ice was melting from Papa's beard, and she saw that he smiled at her. I'm glad you're a little explorer, Kirsten. I'm glad you found this cave. Do you think you can find your way back to the farm from here? I think so, Papa. Then lie back and rest, Papa said. There's nothing we can do until it stops snowing. And you must be very, very tired. Now that they were resting, Kirsten realized she was hungry. She was too exhausted to climb down the path and get what was left of the lunch from the sleigh. But in her pocket, she found a piece of sugar candy Mr. Berkoff had given her at the general store. The candy was shaped like a Christmas bar. She put it in her mouth and lay down beside Papa. The last thing she knew before she fell into deep sleep was a taste of cinnamon and sugar on her tongue. Chapter 5. Silent Night, Lucian Light. When Kirsten woke, Papa was brushing dirt off the fire to put it out. Outside, it was very dark. The night sky was clear, but there was no moon. The storm's gone past, Papa said. Now we can make our way home if you can lead Blackie. I still can't stand on my leg. Kirsten rubbed her eyes and sat up. I can lead him, she said. She rolled up the blanket, and Papa helped her into her boots, which he'd warmed by the fire. While Papa crawled slowly down the path, she untied Blackie and hitched him on the sleigh. The fresh snow gleamed into the starlight. It must be very late if the moon has gone down, Kirsten thought. She imagined Mama peering out the cabin window, looking for them. Mama would be worried. As Kirsten led Blackie beside the stream, she watched her for familiar landmarks. From time to time, she looked at Papa and the sled and at the painted trunks under its roof of snow. The sleigh bell jingled crisply in the starlight. At last, Kirsten recognized a big oak tree and curve in the stream. There she'd often met singing bird, but the woods looked different in deep snow. It was a place where they would turn to find the farms. She hesitated. Blackie nudged her with his nose. Yes, this must be the way. Before Kirsten saw the cabin and Uncle Olaf's house, she smelled wood smoke. Then they came around a turn, and she saw the candles lit up all the windows of Uncle Olaf's house. Everyone was waiting there. They had stayed up all night to look for her and Papa. Kirsten led Blackie right up to Uncle Olaf's door. As they approached, Papa shouted, "We are here! We are safe!" Faces appeared at all the windows. The door swung wide, and Mama ran out. "Here you are at last! We were so worried," she said as she hugged Kirsten. "But you're hurt," she added when she saw Papa. She climbed into the sleigh to hug him too. Everyone crowded around the sleigh, asking questions. Uncle Olaf helped Papa down from the sleigh, and Aunt Inger said, "I'll heat some soup to warm your chilly bones." Lisbeth, Anna, and Miss Winston all hugged Kirsten. Even Lars squeezed her shoulder before he went to untie the trunks. Peter was jumping up and down in front of the stove. "We stayed up all night to watch for you. Even Miss Winston stayed up all night," he said for a moment. Kirsten stood in the doorway to the kitchen and just stared. It seemed to her that she and Papa had been gone for days instead of hours, and now the world seemed turned upside down. It was the middle of the night, but in the kitchen, where all the lamps were lit, it was bright as day, and Inger bustled about heating the potato soup. But everyone was wearing night clothes. Kirsten smiled to see Uncle Olaf with his nightshirt tucked into his trousers and his sleeping cap still on his head. She smiled to see Anna in her nightgown and Mama's sweater. which trailed down to the floor. Even Miss Winston's hair was unbraided, although she had gotten dressed. At last, Christine sat near the warm stove with a bowl of hot soup in front of her. Mama hugged her once more, so hard she was nearly lifted from her chair. "Oh, I knew you shouldn't have gone with Papa to fetch the trunks," Mama said. "But Papa said, 'Be glad Christine came with me. She's a brave girl and a strong one. If she hadn't been along to help me, I'd never have found a cave on my way home.'" Mama put her arms around Papa's waist. "I can't believe that Christine is brave as her Papa. Come sit down here and rest your leg. I'll bring you some soup." She smiled at Christine. "Don't let yours get cold." Anna and Elizabeth came to sit by Christine as she ate. "We were so frightened for you," Anna said. "Our Papa wanted to go out in the storm to search for you, but Mama said he'd never find you on foot. We didn't know what to do. Were you scared?" Christine slipped the thick soup. "I was scared. Then I was too busy to be scared anymore. Anyway, we are here now, and we've got the trunk." Under the table, she gave Anna's hand a squeeze. Anna put her hand close to Christine's. "You don't want to have our surprise now, do you?" Christine grinned. "This is St. Lucia's Day, and it's a perfect time," she whispered. "St. Lucia is supposed to wake everyone at 4 in the morning. It must be about 4 now." Elizabeth pulled her chair closer. "But how will we surprise everyone when they are awake?" "Anyway," she asked. Christine lowered her voice even more. "When Lars and Uncle Olaf bring the trunk in, Mama is sure to want to open it. I'll sneak the white dress out. In the meantime, you can get the crown and a tray of bread. Then we're all ready. Miss Winston can tell everyone to shut their eyes. How will that be?" "It's a grand idea," Anna said, and whispered to Mr. Winston what she's supposed to do. Lars and Uncle Olaf carried the painted trunks into the middle of the cabin. When Uncle Olaf lifted the lid, the sweet scent of dried lavender filled the air. Christine hurried to Mama's side. Mama reached into the trunks, and out came Sari. Mama gave the doll a little hug and handed her to Christine. "I know how much you missed your doll, Christine. Last night I missed you and Papa even more. Now we are together again. Even Sari." Christine took Sari in both hands, and looked at her closely in the flickering light. Sari was just a rag doll with a faded face and a sun-bleached dress, but she was Christine's very, very own. Christine pressed Sari to her cheek. "And here's Peter's clay whistle," Mama said. Papa smiled and held his finger to his lips. Peter has fallen asleep beside him. "This had been a long night," Mama said gently to Papa. "You must be exhausted. Let's all get some sleep and finish unpacking the trunk later." Anna leaned around the table, around the end of the trunk, and tugged Christine's shirt. "Do something," she whispered. "At least find the sweaters for More," Christine said to Mama. "And the pillow covers you will for Aunt Inger. Unpack at least that much." Mama didn't need to be urged. Piece by piece, she began to lift their precious things through the trunk. She handed them to Aunt Inger, who laid them on the table. Christine watched for her chance while Aunt Inger was exclaiming over the pillow covers. Christine slipped the white nightdress from the trunk and handed it to Anna. The red sash was right next to it, inside Peter's cap. Anna shoved them both under her sweater. But of the corner of her eye, Christine saw Elizabeth climbing down the ladder from the loft. She had the crown on the candles wrapped in a cord. The girls met at the far end of the kitchen by the door into the shed. "Here's a tray," Elizabeth said, "and Miss Winston's ready. Quick, put on the dress. It's cold." Christine slipped off her dress and shawl and poured the white nightdress over her head. Next came the red sash. Finally, Elizabeth finished the crown on Christine's head and lit the candles. "Oh, Christine," Anna breathed. "You look like an angel. We're almost ready for you," Elizabeth said as she lit the candle on the tray. Miss Winston came hurrying into the kitchen. "I told everyone to shut their eyes. Then I turned on the lamps. Come now, they're waiting." Anna and Elizabeth scampered across the kitchen ahead of Christine. Christine lifted her head high, took a deep breath, and walked slowly, holding a tray of coffee and bread. The big room was dim except for the lights of her crown. Christine paused in the doorway. She saw everyone waiting with their eyes closed. "As Miss Winston had asked them to do, St. Lucia invites you to breakfast," Christine said. For just a moment the room was still. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the stove. Then commotion began. Peter rubbed his eyes. "Oh, it's Christmas time," he called. Everyone called out, "Merry Christmas!" And what a wonderful surprise! Christine looked around the room and she passed the St. Lucia tray to her family. Mama's blue eyes were shining, and Inger and Uncle Olaf were smiling with pleasure. Peter and Lars grinned and munched their breads. Miss Winston squeezed Anna's hand. "Is that what it was like last Christmas in Sweden?" Elizabeth asked Christine as she handed Papa a mug of coffee. Christine thought a moment about how much she'd loved the home she'd left behind in Sweden. Then she smiled at the cousin she liked so well. How happy she'd been tonight when she and Papa had finally found their way back to this new home, which was brightly lit for them in the dark. "It's almost the same, but this year, I think it's even better," she told Elizabeth. "Yes, it is a better Christmas. I think it's the best one of all." Looking back, 1854, a peek into the past. Christmas in 1854. On the American frontier, Christmas was a time for special celebrations. Settlers like the Larsons had a lot to celebrate. They had found new homes. They had good food, good health, and good neighbors. They were building new lives in America, including new American Christmas traditions. Just as people on the frontier taught one another good ways to farm, build houses, and care for animals, they also shared their ways of celebrating Christmas. Christine told her cousins about the Swedish tradition of St. Lucia in return, and then Elizabeth probably showed her how they celebrated Christmas on their Minnesota farm. Their first Christmas in America would be a cheerful mix of old and new, Swedish and American traditions. For families living in frontier towns in 1854, there were Christmas fairs and dances, church suppers, door-to-door caroling, and moonlit sleigh rides. But families who lived on farms had to make their own Christmas cheer. Their celebrations were quite quiet because frontier farms were far away from towns and from one another. Their celebrations were simple because works always came first on the farm. Cows had to be milked, horses had to be fed, fences had to be mended, and firewood had to be chopped. Even at Christmas time, pioneer families like the Larsons couldn't celebrate Christmas for a whole month, as they had in Sweden. Because there was too much work to do just to survive. Winter was hard in Minnesota, and the bitter cold, the wind, and the snow was always dangerous enemies. So pioneers found some extra time to make Christmas special. Mothers and daughters started to prepare for Christmas by scrubbing every inch of the house. From top to bottom, they washed all the clothes in curtains and hung them out in the brisk, clean December wind. Cabins would smell delicious as special Christmas foods were prepared. Mama may have taught Kirsten how to make bread, cookies, spiced meats, and cheeses for her favorite Swedish Christmas recipes, and Inger may have shown Kirsten and Mama how to cook a frontier feast of wild turkey stuffed with dry berries. Miss Winston may have introduced them to pumpkin pie and Yankee cornbread. By 1854, Christmas decorations on the frontier came from many different countries. Some immigrant families decorated their cabins so that they looked like their homes in the old country. Mama would have draped bright woven clothes over the rafters and polished their brass candlesticks until they glowed, just as she had in Sweden. German immigrants introduced other pioneers to everyone's favorite Christmas decoration, the Christmas tree. Children like Anna, Elizabeth, and Kirsten would have had a happy time decorating their tree with painted wooden hearts and little animals made of straw. They would have made ropes of dried berries too. Sometimes Swedish families in America decorated their barns for Christmas. They attached a large bunch of wheat to a long pole just outside the door. The wheat became a Christmas feast for the birds. Swedish traditions said that a large flock of birds at Christmas time meant a good harvest the next year, and a good harvest was always important to a frontier family. Candles were too precious for pioneers to waste, but on Christmas Eve, a family like the Larsens may have kept the old Swedish tradition of lighting a candle in every window to show the way for Jultomten, the Swedish Christmas elf. He always visited on Christmas Eve. Later, he gave gifts too. The gifts brought to the American frontier would have been simple and useful. Perhaps there would be a pair of knitted mittens, a new hat, or a scarf. Part of the fun of Jultomten's visit came from the funny jokes, poems, and riddles written on the packages he brought. Before children could open their presents, they had to try to guess what was inside. What do you think this present could be? Red and berries, soft as kittens. These are for Christine, a new pair of gloves. Frontier families tried very hard to get to church on Christmas Day. Services went on all day long, but snow, cold, and works kept many families on the farm. On that day, after the chores were done, a family like the Larsens would gather around their tree. They would sing hymns, read the story of the first Christmas from the Bible, and give thanks to the blessing of their first American Christmas. The end of Kirsten's Surprise, A Christmas Story, Book 3.